A federal judge looked at the promise printed on your hunting jacket, eliminates all human scent, and ruled it false. Not exaggerated, not misleading. False as a matter of law. Then the industry kept selling you that exact promise anyway. It just moved it to a different bottle. Here's the part nobody tells you, and it's the part that decides whether you ever hand these people another dollar. Because the story you've probably heard about carbon hunting clothing comes in two flavors, and both of them are wrong. One version says it's a total scam, snake oil, throw it out. The other says it works, the lawsuit proved it, buy more. Neither of those is the truth, and the truth sitting in the gap between them is uglier than either one. Uglier because it isn't an accident and it isn't a mistake. The truth is a company that got told in a federal courtroom that its central claim was false, and then walked out of that courtroom and printed the same claim on a bottle of detergent instead of a jacket, where nobody was watching. Let me give you the whole thing, not the version that flatters the company, not the version that calls you a sucker for ever buying it. The version that holds up when someone checks it, because on this channel, the honesty is the only thing I've got to sell you, and I'm not going to spend it lying to make a point land harder. So start with what the clothing is, because I'm not going to stand here and pretend it does nothing. Activated carbon is real technology. It's in gas masks, it's in water filters, it's in the air scrubbers they run on spacecraft to keep the crew breathing. The way it works is a process called adsorption, with a D, where odor molecules cling to the enormous internal surface of the carbon. And that surface is almost impossible to picture. A single gram of good activated carbon can hold the surface area of a tennis court, folded and folded again into something you could balance on a fingertip. Embed that carbon into a fabric, wrap it around a hunter, and yes, some of the scent coming off your body gets caught in there before it drifts downwind. That is not marketing. That's chemistry, and I'm telling you plainly that it's true. It gets better for the company before it gets worse. In the lawsuit we're going to walk through, the company's own paid expert ran what's called permeation testing, and he estimated the carbon garments blocked 96 to 99% of odor compounds, against as little as 5% for a plain shirt. 96 to 99. That's the number the defense put on the record, and if you've ever bought this clothing, that's the number that was quietly doing the selling. Now, hold that number loosely, because it came from a defense expert hired by the company, working in a controlled lab under ideal conditions. It is not an independent measurement. It is not a deer in a real bedding area, and it does not have one drop of your sweat in it. I'm putting it on the table first, and I'm putting it there on purpose, because the honest case for this clothing is genuinely strong. Carbon adsorbs odor. It adsorbs a lot of it, and hunters who know what they're doing swear by the stuff. I'm not going to hide any of that from you. I don't need to, because here is where the whole thing breaks. And it breaks on your own body, in the field, the moment that lab number meets the real world. That 96% comes from a dry lab. You are not a dry lab. You sweat. And water vapor, the humidity pouring off your skin the second you start the hike in or haul yourself up into a stand, competes for the exact same adsorption sites the odor is supposed to grab onto. This is not a hunting opinion, and it's not mine. It's measured over and over in peer-reviewed chemistry that has nothing to do with hunting at all. Raise the humidity around activated carbon, and its ability to grab organic compounds collapses. One study clocked a 56% loss in capacity as the humidity climbed toward 90%. Another watched a target compound's adsorption fall by roughly half at high humidity. The carbon cannot tell the difference between the water coming off your back and the odor coming off your skin. It just fills up, and it fills up fastest when you're working hardest. The pack in, the climb, the drag out, which is the precise moment your body is throwing off the most scent for it to catch. Read that back slowly, because it's the whole thing in one line. The moment you need the jacket, most is the moment your own sweat is shoving the odor out of line for a seat on the carbon. The harder you hunt, the faster the technology you paid for saturates and quits. It's not built to fail you. It just does exactly what carbon does, and carbon has no loyalty. And all of that is before we even talk about your breath. The jacket doesn't cover your mouth. It doesn't cover your nose. You are exhaling scent-loaded air the entire time you sit in that stand, hour after hour, and there is not one thread of carbon on your chest that does anything about the plume coming off your face. A deer downwind isn't reading your jacket. It's reading the whole column of air standing around your body, your breath, your scalp, your hands, the ground you walked in on, the gear you carried. The clothing treats one piece of that and sells it to you as the whole solution. And it sells it hardest to the people least able to test it, because you will never, ever get to check the work. When a deer smells you and slips off before you ever see it, you don't learn a thing. There's no alarm, no busted stalk you can point to, no feedback at all. Just an empty woods and a hunter who assumes the system worked because nothing obviously failed. That silence is the perfect cover for a product that can't deliver. You can't catch it failing, so you keep paying. So, what exactly is on the other end of this promise? What's the nose you're up against? A whitetail carries somewhere in the neighborhood of 297 million scent receptors. You have about 5 million. The people who study deer estimate the animal is roughly 60 times more likely to catch a foreign odor than you are. And I'll be square with you, that receptor count gets passed around the industry a lot more than it gets measured in a lab. So take the exact figure as a well-worn estimate rather than gospel. But the direction of it isn't in dispute. Nobody serious argues a deer's nose is anything but staggering. That is the machine the label eliminates all human scent is picking a fight with. You are being sold total elimination. 0 molecules, none, 100% of the time, against an animal that is engineered from the nose back to find the one molecule you missed. Sit with the size of that claim. All human scent, not most, not a helpful amount, all against that. It was never aggressive marketing. It was a physical impossibility, and it was a physical impossibility on the day it went to print, in a way that no lab result and no courtroom could ever change, which is what makes the court fight so revealing. Because somebody did take this to a judge. 2007, U.S. District Court, District of Minnesota. 5 hunters sued the makers of carbon hunting clothing over exactly these claims. And in 2010, the judge, Richard Kyle, went through the advertising line by line and wrote that phrases like complete scent elimination, scent-free, works on 100% of your scent, all human scent, and odor is eradicated were literally false as a matter of law. A federal judge, in a written order. Those specific words, false. Now, you have to stay with me here, because this is the exact spot where the lazy version of this story drives into a ditch, and I'm not going to do the lazy version, because the lazy version is also wrong, and it'll get this whole channel called liars. That ruling got appealed. And in 2011, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals knocked down the order the hunters had won. But listen very carefully to what got knocked down, because it is not the thing it sounds like. The appeals court did not rule that the ads were true. It did not clear the product. It did not touch the finding that the words were false. What it reversed was one specific thing, the injunction, the court order the hunters had asked for. And here's the mechanics of why, because the mechanics are the whole point. To win that kind of order, the hunters had to prove they'd been harmed. The trial judge had shortcut past that step, assuming harm automatically just because the ad was false. And he did it by borrowing a rule that exists for one company suing a competitor, not for consumers suing a manufacturer. The appeals court said, no, you can't shortcut that. A consumer has to actually prove the damage in dollars, and these 5 hunters hadn't. Their case failed on proof of harm. It did not fail because the advertising turned out to be honest. The falseness was never the thing in question on appeal. And then the appeals court added one more thing, off to the side, not as the ruling, just as a comment. It said it doubted there were many hunters so scientifically unsophisticated as to believe that any product could eliminate every molecule of human scent. Stop on that sentence, because that sentence is the entire con sitting right out in the open. The company's defense, the argument that saved it, boiled down to this: nobody's dumb enough to believe us. That was the shield. Not our product works as advertised, not the claim is true. The winning move was to argue that the promise printed on the label was so obviously unbelievable that no reasonable hunter would ever fall for it. And then they went right on selling that promise. That's the villain, and I want to be careful here because it's not a cartoon, and I'm not going to inflate it into one. A company stood in front of a federal court and won by arguing that its own biggest promise was too good to be taken seriously. And then it walked out and kept making that promise to the very hunters it had just described on the record as too smart to buy it. You cannot have that both ways. Either the claim means something, in which case a judge has already told you it's false, or the claim means nothing, in which case explain to me what you're paying a premium for. Pick one. They won't, because the fog is the product. What they did next was quieter and smarter than just lying twice. They pulled the loud language off the clothing. The clothing had taken the hit in court, so the clothing got careful. Read the jackets today and they've lawyered up. They say reduces. They say the fabric adsorbs the odors your body generates. They talk about scent control instead of scent elimination. Careful, defensible words. But then look one shelf over at the sprays and the detergents and the soaps. The products nobody sued. The bottle of laundry detergent still tells you it eliminates human scent. The field spray still promises to kill odor on contact. The claim that a federal judge called false didn't die in that courtroom. It just relocated. It hopped off the jacket, which was under scrutiny, and onto the consumables, which weren't. Same promise, new label, lower profile. And the belief itself never got walked back. It just got reworded into something no court can pin down. The company's own marketing today doesn't say eliminates all human scent anymore. It says, in the words of its own marketing people, that when the clothing is used properly, it's been proven to beat the noses of mature deer. Read that slowly. When used properly. That little phrase is doing an enormous amount of work because it quietly moves the entire burden onto you. If the carbon fails, if a buck blows out of the county with your wind, well, you must not have used it properly. You showered wrong. You skipped a spray. You didn't reactivate on schedule. The product can never fail by definition because any failure gets reclassified as your mistake. It's the oldest trick in the book. Build an escape hatch into the promise so the promise can never be tested and never be wrong. The old language got them sued. The new language can't be. And it puts every failure on your shoulders instead of theirs. And those consumables, that shelf, that's the real business. This is the part I most want you to see clearly because it's where the money actually lives, and it has almost nothing to do with whether the carbon works at all. When you buy the jacket, you have not bought a product. You've bought a doorway. Because the carbon fills up with odor, with sweat, with everything in the air around you. And to make it work again, the company tells you, you have to reactivate it. Into the dryer it goes, medium-high heat, and the instruction is to do this every 40 hours of field use. But not before you've washed it in the special scent-free detergent, their detergent. And don't toss just any spray in the dryer with it. Use the brand's field spray. And out in the woods, carry that same spray to touch yourself up through the day. And before you ever leave the house, shower in the scent-free body wash, scrub with the scent-free soap, rinse with the scent-free shampoo. Every one of those is a separate purchase. Every one of them runs dry. The detergent runs $9, $10 a bottle. The field spray, $12, $13, and climbing. The soap and the body wash, call it another $20 for the set. And that's the floor, not the ceiling, because the ladder keeps going up from there. There's a whole tier above the sprays, the ozone machines, the sealed storage systems, the complete kits with a dozen matched pieces in them, running you $200, $300 for the privilege of doing the ritual more thoroughly. Walk into the scent control aisle and it isn't one product. It's a product family that has been carefully arranged so that owning any one piece implies you're supposed to own the next one. The jacket needs the detergent to get clean. The detergent gets you a clean jacket that needs the spray to stay clean. The spray gets you a jacket that needs the dryer cycle to reactivate. And every rung on that ladder is another bottle, another purchase, another thing that runs out on a schedule. Add a single season's worth of refills, and you're looking at $80, $100, $150 a year in bottles alone, on top of the clothing. And it renews every single season for as long as you keep hunting. There is no version of this where you buy it once and you're done. It was never designed to be bought once. It was designed to be a habit. Here's the one time I'll ask you for anything. If you spent this money, if there's a shelf in your garage right now with 4 of these bottles standing on it, go down to the comments and tell me what the whole system has cost you over the years. Add it up, because I don't think most hunters ever have, and I think the number's going to make some of you angry. Subscribe if you want the rest of these teardowns, because that's the entire job of this channel, to add up the number the industry is counting on you never adding up. Now come back to that reactivation claim, because this is where the whole recurring machine collapses on its own logic, and this is the part that turns an annoyance into a genuine trap. The pitch is that the dryer resets the carbon, brings it back to like new. Here's the problem with that word reset. Reactivating spent carbon for real, actually driving the trapped molecules back out and restoring that tennis court surface, takes heat in the range of 500 to 1,000 degrees Celsius. That's furnace heat. Industrial kiln heat. Your home dryer, cranked to its hottest setting, tops out somewhere around 60 or 70 degrees Celsius. That is not a small gap you can wave away. That is the difference between a foundry and a warm afternoon. Now, in fairness, and I promised you the version that holds up, so here's the company's side. They'll tell you the odor coming off your body only forms weak physical bonds, the loose kind that really can be broken at low dryer heat, so the furnace temperatures aren't necessary for their purposes. And there's something to that. A home dryer probably does drive off some of the most loosely held odor molecules. I'll hand them that much. But drives off some of the loose stuff is a very different sentence than restores it to like new. And you don't have to take my word for the size of that difference, because in that 2010 case, the experts on both sides settled it for us. The hunter's expert and the company's own expert agreed that once carbon fabric has been used, it cannot be fully reactivated to be like new. Both sides, under oath. The court found the words like new and pristine false for that exact reason. The people paid to defend this product could not defend that word. So now walk the full loop, slowly, because when you see the whole circle, it's hard to unsee. They sell you a jacket. The jacket degrades, and that's not a defect. That's just carbon behaving like carbon. To fix the degrade, they sell you a ritual. The dryer cycle, the detergent, the spray, the soap, on a schedule, forever. And the ritual does not actually restore the jacket, because their own witnesses testified that it can't. So you are buying a lifetime subscription of consumables to repair a thing that the manufacturer's own experts told a federal court does not get repaired. The bottles run out. The carbon runs down. One of those two is engineered to renew, and one of them isn't. And you are paying, on schedule, for both. That's the trap. Not that carbon is fake. It isn't. Not that a court proved fraud. It didn't. And I won't tell you it did. The trap is a product built to wear out, wrapped in a maintenance system built to sell, sitting underneath a promise a federal judge already called false. A promise the company defended when it was cornered by telling the court you were far too smart to believe it. So is there anybody who actually beats all this? Sort of. And I'll be straight with you about them too, because a video that only shows one side is just an ad pointed the other way. There are serious, disciplined hunters, public land bow hunters, with more mature bucks on the wall than most of us will ever lay eyes on, who run carbon clothing and defend it hard. But listen to how they use it, because the how is the tell. Rubber boots, always. Dress in the field, never in the truck. Store the clothes sealed in a tote. Cover your face. Hunt high, 25 feet up a tree, and play the wind like the entire hunt depends on it, because it does. For those guys, the carbon is the last 1%. It's one more edge stacked on top of a mountain of discipline about wind and scent and entry routes and access. It is not the thing doing the work. It's the thing they add after they've already done all the work. And that right there is the quiet confession sitting under this whole industry. Even the hunters it works for don't trust it to work on its own. They trust the wind. The carbon is insurance on top of the wind. And the one independent study anyone can point to, not a manufacturer's in-house test, an actual outside researcher, USDA, published in a peer-reviewed wildlife journal, took odor-adsorbing suits and put them up against trained detection dogs. The finding: the suits made little difference. Little effect on the dog's ability to find the person wearing one. That is the single independent measurement in more than 30 years of this product sitting on shelves. One study, and it came back small. Sit with the weight of that. 3 decades. An entire industry. Hunters spending hundreds of dollars a year, season after season. And the independent evidence that any of it beats a real animal's nose in the real world basically does not exist. Nobody's produced it. That absence, that 30-year silence where the proof should be, is the single loudest thing in this entire story, and the industry is counting on you never noticing how quiet it is. So here's where all of it leaves you standing. The carbon does something. That's real. And I told you it was real at the very top, before I'd earned anything, so you'd know I'd tell you the truth down here at the bottom. But does something was never the deal you were offered. The deal was, eliminates all human scent, 100% of your scent, 100% of the time. And that promise is beaten by your own sweat, escaped by your own breath, and aimed at a nose 60 times sharper than yours will ever be. A federal judge called the exact words false. The company's own defense was that you were too smart to believe them, and then it turned around and sold you the belief anyway, on the bottle instead of the jacket, on a schedule that does not end as long as you keep hunting. You were never the fool in this story. You were the target. So the next time a label promises to erase you completely, to make you disappear, to make you scent-free, to work on all of your scent all of the time, remember the one moment this company was forced to tell the truth, standing in a courtroom with its own money on the line. What it said was, nobody's supposed to believe that. Believe them. About that one thing, believe them completely. And then take the money you'd have spent on the bottles and spend it on nothing at all, because the wind is free, the wind is honest, and the wind is the only thing out in those woods that genuinely cannot smell you back.